Whereas the Great Sioux Lakota Nation is comprised of the Oglala in Pine Ridge that scatter their own, Shichongu, Rosebud, the Burnt Dyes, Hunkpapa, Standing Rock, entrance of the Camp Circle, Manikonye Wojupi, Cheyenne River, plants near the water, Sihasapa, Cheyenne River, the Blackfeet, Oohenumpa, Cheyenne River, the Two Kettles, and Itazipo Chola bands, Cheyenne River without bows. Whereas the traditional reference for these bands is known around the world as Tehinchala Oyate, or Buffalo Calf people, and emanate as indigenous to what is defined as the North American continent. More specifically from the territories surrounding and including the Chesapa, or the Black Hills of South Dakota, and received their instruction from matriarchal origin. Whereas the Great Sioux Nation has inherent rights to exercise its authority under the laws of creation and laws established with the United States under treaties 1851 and 1868, followed by the Constitution of the United States of America. Recognizing territory boundary, mineral, timber, water, and natural resources to include gold taken and 98 million acres with full physical, emotional, and spiritual relationship. Whereas the Constitution of the United States establishes Article 6, treaties made with Indian nations are the supreme law of the land. 1851 Treaty, Article 3, the United States binds themselves to protect the aforesaid Indian nations against the commission of all depredations by the people of the United States, as well as provision and annuity guaranteed under the 1868 treaty after gold was discovered in the Black Hills, which are 1. Land allotment for every head of household, 2. Housing, 3. Education, 4. Health care, and 5. Welfare. Whereas the Black Hills and surrounding territory has never been for sale, and every attempt to force the settlement for title has been through military, political, judicial, and social imposition under duress, cultural genocide, media blackout, distortion of truth and fact, policy depredation, economic attrition, reconciliation apathy, and refusal to provide just and proper compensation as required by federal law to each and every member of the Great Sioux Nation on the part of the United States of America, its representatives and authority. Reference the 1980 Supreme Court case, the Great Sioux Nation versus United States of America, and the Cobell case between indigenous landowners and the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Department of the Interior. Whereas treaties promoted, established, and signed were initiated by the people of the United States with the Great Sioux Nation to include the presidency, the Supreme Court, and the Congress, as opposed to relegation of responsibility for treaties to the office of the president, the executive branch only, and permits for unfunded mandates. This also made null and void the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, as it was not the French's to sell. Whereas traditional customary law establishes general consensus of 75% or more under the 1868 treaty, which requires 3/4 adult Indian male, and current political policy is designed to eliminate every possession the Great Sioux Nation rightfully owns. This includes congressional unilateral acts affecting original treaty stipulations, such as the Howard Wheeler Dawes Act, 1887, which stripped away land allotment for every head of household and opened up the treaty territories to white settlement. The Indian Citizenship Act, in concert with the Social Security Act and Snyder Act in 1924, which stripped away welfare entitlement and placed in the hands of states to administer social service programs. The 1934 Indian Reorganization or Self-Determination Act, which allowed for a simple majority of 30% without a treasury to function and replaced any semblance of traditional constitutional structure with an emulation of the United States Constitution. In contrast, the tribal government only requires 30% of those who register and those who reside on the reservations to vote, effectively certifying elections and passing laws with less than 15% of all the eligible voters, contrary to what is required by contemporary law. In addition, includes self-preservation strategies such as sovereign immunity from prosecution by its membership, and utilizing the majority for statistic and federal acquisition funding while not sharing its tax exemption status with the membership. establishing the Bureau of Indian Affairs under the Department of the War, Department of Interior rather, formerly the Department of War, and creating policies to regulate animals as a method of Cetera Bull Papal doctrines, thus producing the blood quantum, and allowing for theft of land and resources of the general membership without a land audit to date. Creating the Indian Health Service, which is self-serving, commercial, not providing adequate health care to all members, and requires members to purchase private health insurance. Establishing the Housing Authority as another commercial entity, HUD, which now charges the membership rent and enforces an eviction policy. Finally, creating verbiage such as plenary power when it comes to justification of theft and irresponsibility when this is also illegal under federal constitutional law called previous condition of servitude. Whereas these many depredations have permitted and caused the near total annihilation of the Lakota philosophical, cultural, and customary spiritual structures to be replaced by prejudice and discrimination, arrogance and fear, as well as egocentrism and privilege. In contrast, the Lakota spiritual practices emanate from an all-inclusive belief system based on selfless spiritual conduct and confidence in self without fear. Whereas the existing methods of providing services to the individual members of the Great Sioux Nation is ineffective, as evidenced in the BIA lack of accountability, as well as the tribal government inability to maintain itself as a separate, distinct entity or enforce proper sovereign design and implementation. Whereas each decade, more and more of the tribal lands are being compromised to non-Indian ownership without the knowledge or approval of the majority membership. Such policy will result in the future generations without a land base. Whereas the tribal membership who have not received an allotment of land as an entitlement are the true sovereigns to the stated treaty territories and natural resources. Whereas the United States of America is directly responsible for the devastation and destruction of the Lakota way of living, resulting in the general population being subject to decades of discrimination, forced assimilation, emotional suffering, dependence on ration of services, failed federal and state policy, as well as abject poverty, while the rest of the United States of America continue to prosper in the surrounding areas. Therefore, be it resolved, it is not in the best interest of the general population of the Great Sioux Nation to rely on the Secretary of the Interior, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or the tribal government to protect the aforesaid Indian nations against the commission of all depredations by the people of the United States. The only reasonable and feasible solution to decades-old termination policy is to replace the current structure with per capita distribution of funds to individual tribal members as established in U.S. Code Title 25, 117A. That such disbursement be handled by competent federal entity, such as the Treasury Department, which allows for calculated treaty stipulation entitlement as previously described, so long as the treaty territories are occupied. That such per capita disbursement be awarded due to the pain, suffering, and damages caused by the United States of America to the individual members of the Great Sioux Nation, whose lineage is established prior to the implementation of the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act. Such per capita is to be awarded in the amount sufficient for each member to purchase a home, land, education, K through 12, health insurance, and provide for their general welfare. Also stated amount shall be no less than $720,000 for each adult member the first year, with annual payments to follow at $40,000. That accounts be automatically established for each born member under 18 to current year of age at $40,000 per annum, till they reach of age of maturity with cultural ceremony. Be it further resolved that each member of the Great Sioux Nation is to acknowledge and adhere to the basic practices of the Lakota, to include possessing a basic understanding and knowledge of the language, culture, and spirituality. That stated per capita is not a free entitlement, but comes with a requirement to reacculturate oneself to their heritage. Such requirements are to be reasonable, yet competent in expectation by a re-established tribal council, responsible for the conduct and spiritual honor befitting membership of the Great Sioux Nation.